And exploding stars shine with the brightness of 10 billion stars. They're the brightest fireworks in the universe, supernovae. And they're remarkable, and I keep having asides. Maybe I'll get to my point eventually. But this is something that I wrote a whole book about, and someone asked me yesterday why I wrote that book. Because it is the most poetic thing I know about the universe. Richard wrote a great book called, what's it called? Our Ancestors? What's it called? Ancestor's Tale, yes. I wanted to make sure I got that right. And I wrote a book that was a different ancestor's tale. It was called Adam. But the amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today. Okay? And anyway.
First Baptist Church, may I help you?
Hey there, man. My name's Nate. How you doing?
All right.
Hey, man. I was just wondering if I could talk to the pastor real quick. I had a question about the Bible.
All right, this is he.
Hey, man. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've just got a question.
Okay.
So, I'm a follower of Christ, and, I'm reading my Bible here in Genesis chapter 1, and I've got this verse here, Genesis chapter 1, verse 6. It says, "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Pastor, what's the firmament, the biblical, meaning of that?
Well, the way I understand it, it is effectively the atmosphere that we live and breathe in.
Right.
Because the waters, just like today, where's water? It's on the ground. Where'd the water come from? It came from the sky.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? There's two places that the water is.
Right.
It's either in the ground, on the earth, or it's in the atmosphere above it. But that which we live and breathe in is the firmament in between.
Right. Well, I believe it or not, Pastor, I thought that initially, and I'd have never called you if it had been settled with that. However, looking down beyond within the verses, it says here in verse 14, it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven." So if you're saying that the firmament's the sky and the atmosphere, I know surely the sun and the moon's not in the sky, right?
Well, but where does it appear to be?
Well, believe it or not, it appears to be in the sky, but we know that it's not in the sky, right? It's not the atmosphere.
Well, but that's because you're defining the word sky maybe a little too small.
Right. Well, I know the atmosphere don't go out beyond the moon or nothing like that. And I'm just, another reason why I'm just curious is because it says there's water above it. So if firmament is the sky or space, I know there's not water above the sky or space out there above the sun, right?
Well, that we don't really know. Now, they went to the moon. Best we can tell, they didn't discover water.
Right, and they didn't drown up there or nothing.
Well, but there again, we don't drown in the part of the sky that we're in, do we?
Right, right. So, man, so the firmament is 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 the sky, and it's the atmosphere. That's what you're telling me.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So the firmament is most definitely the atmosphere around the Earth, and when it says that the sun, the moon are in the atmosphere, it doesn't really mean that.
Well, again, you're limiting it too small.
I'm sorry, I thought you said that the firmament was the atmosphere. Maybe I misunderstood you.
Well, that's part of it. But what he did was he separated.
There's two firmaments.
Well, I think you're misreading that.
I'm sorry, maybe I am. I think I'm a little dyslexic sometimes anyway. So right here, he put an atmosphere in the middle of the waters, right? So it says he put a firmament in the midst of the waters to divide the waters which were under the firmament from the waters above the firmament.
Well, you started with verse 6, right?
Right.
He said, then now, part of what your challenge is, you're reading out of King James, are you not?
Right. That's the one I've got here.
Well, there's nothing really wrong with it. We just don't talk that way anymore.
Right. That makes a lot of sense because I've never really seen the firmament word.
Well, because verse 6, this is the way New American Standard, which is very, very much a word-for-word translation. This is how verse 6 reads. Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.
Man, I tell you what, that makes so much more sense when you say that I'm thinking about sky being small. If yours says expanse, I'm thinking big, right?
Well, and what was the other verse you questioned? 16?
Well, it was down here. Give me 1 second. It was down here in verse 14. It says, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven.
Yeah, in the expanse of the heavens.
Right.
Now,
all right. Well, that makes much more sense. It's up there in space, right?
Yeah, well, that's what you and I referred to it as, yes.
Right. Well, just out of curiosity, Pastor, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You know, obviously, I know that, you know, the Bible wasn't written, you know, a couple of days ago. It was written a long time ago. And so Moses, right, you know, I know that his story goes, you know, he was a Hebrew and adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter or whatnot. So how exactly did the ancient writers, how did they what's that word, depict the earth and everything like that? Because if you know, you said that's how you know, we look at it as being space and things like that. How did they have a depiction of the world at all at that time, or were they just did they just not even think about that like that right there?
Well, they didn't. They did and they didn't.
What you mean by that?
Well, they did think of it being big, but they didn't realize just how big it is.
Right. You mean the earth, how big the earth is?
Well, we look at the earth and we think, man, that's big.
Right.
We look at the sun and think, that's big. I can't quote this exactly, but I've heard a description of our sun versus other suns, stars.
Right.
and I want to say it was like ours was the size of a golf ball. Our sun is the size of a golf ball compared to, what did they compare it to? Something that would fill a gymnasium, the size of a ball the size of a gymnasium.
Oh my God.
That's the difference.
That is outrageous right there. Well, dang, Pastor, when I read somewhere, pardon my language there, I didn't mean to say dang like that. It says that all the stars are going to fall from heaven. Man, I'd hate for them gymnasium stars to fall down.
Yeah, well, but again, you know, part of our problem is we measure everything by us.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so we look at this thing that gives us light, that warms this body that we're on as huge, and it is, but in comparison to others, it's fractional.
Definitely. Man, it's weird because every time I hear that word firmament, man, you know, two things come to mind right quick, like cement and then firm, right? Because
well, but again, because that's we don't talk like that anymore.
Right. Man. Well, Pastor, you have been a delight to talk to, and I appreciate.
Well, you have as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I appreciate all your time, and
yes,
I appreciate your patience with me this afternoon.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
All right, man. Well, you have a good life, and maybe I'll talk to you again someday.
Okay. Very good.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.